It is time now to take a much closer look at the top stories in the news, get some expert analysis and informed opinion. From our Powerhouse Roundtable, we have got a good one for you this week. The redoubtable H.T.Smith is a Miami attorney, civil rights activist, professor of law at Florida International University. Our friend Rosemary O'Hara is the editorial page editor of the Sun Sentinel. That page has been paying special attention lately to the selection process for a new CEO of Broward's Memorial Healthcare System. Justin Safey is an attorney, founder, and publisher of the esteemed Safey Review, a compilation of what some of the best and brightest are saying about politics in the state of Florida. To all of you, good morning. Great to have you come in.
Great to be here.
HT, we saw the report from Glenna in Haiti, and you look at the situation there, as I have often over the years. You hope for the best, but this is kind of despairing to think that they're coming up on the end of a presidential term and there's nobody to succeed Michel Martelly.
Yeah, this month is the 212th anniversary of the founding of the Republic of Haiti. And when you look at all of the times that outside countries were running the country, and then the dictators, Papa Doc and Baby Doc, and then the little time that they had democracy, you know, we had a period of time from the exchange of power from Bertrand Aristide to Preval that things went kind of smoothly.
Yep.
The people of Haiti are good people, are hardworking people, are faith-based people. They deserve a government as good as they are, and they're not getting it. And I'm hopeful that this transitional government will be put in place so that we do not have the president stay past February 7th. That is a constitutional crisis and a security crisis as well. Yeah,
well said. I was there for the first election of Jean-Bertrand Aristide. It was one of the most exciting periods because something like 97% of eligible Haitians voted. They voted peacefully. They went to the polls. Even illiterate people, you know, they have pictures of the candidates on the ballot and they put their thumbprint by their person, and it was a hopeful moment. Not so hopeful right now.
I guess the only hope is that, you know, the people have spoken. This election, the runoff, was nobody believes it. They don't believe these two finalists really won it. And so as it was marching toward an election this week, you know, the people said, we don't trust it, start over. Right. And while it is a crisis and a constitutional crisis, and it's so hard, it's such a chaotic country and a corrupt country, but the only good news in the whole thing is that, wow, power to the people. Nobody likes the violence, but the people are demanding a fair election, and so
let's hope they get it.
Let's hope Jimmy Carter comes on the scene.
I was there once when he oversaw the elections. I don't think Jimmy Carter is going to change much. Anyway, let's move on to the state legislature. And Justin Safey, you have been up in Tallahassee and watching the legislature at work. Always an amazing thing to watch. The dynamic of power, how it shifts. The one thing I'd like to begin with is what I thought was a courageous and gutsy move in the state Senate. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Miguel Diaz-de-la-Portilla of Miami, a Republican this week, stopped dead in its tracks, as it were, the campus carry bill. Wait, what a moment that must have been.
Yeah, really. I mean, he's the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and his role, he gets to decide which bills come before the committee and which ones don't. And there is a fair amount of pressure on him as a Republican to schedule the bill, at least to have a hearing on it. Right. But he doesn't like the bill. This would allow for the open carry of firearms, or the carrying of firearms, rather, on college campuses, on Florida's public universities. And he says, look, I didn't like the bill last year. I don't like it this year. I'm not going to schedule it for a hearing, which effectively kills the bill.
Right, because it will not get to the Senate floor. The House supports that bill, but Rosemary, you've editorialized on this. So what do you think?
Thank God for the Senate. You know, the Senate is being put in a barricade up this year. When John Thrasher was in the Senate, who's now president of Florida State, the Senate was a barrier the last time around. You know, the NRA has oversized clout in Tallahassee, and so it is a surprise and a delight to see finally the lawmakers say more guns is not the answer.
And you know, I've never liked the fact that the head of a committee could have so much power. On this one, I changed my mind.
Yeah, I'm reminded of what a big-time Hollywood movie producer once said. He said, "Absolute power corrupts. Absolute power. Power tends to corrupt. Absolute power is fabulous." So for Miguel Diaz de la Portilla, and I'm going to at the end of the show have a little attaboy for him.
But you know, we still have stand your ground legislation moving forward. Changing it so that the burden shifts to the state. I know in the House there was a setback in a committee, but it's still alive. And we also still have open carry of concealed firearms is still there. So we got to watch that very, very carefully and see that that comes out the right way as well.
Yeah. Justin, what do you think is going to happen with open carry, which will allow people who have concealed weapons permits to openly carry their weapons with them?
Well, that's going to be the next battle, and I don't really have a good prediction right now. The NRA is supporting this bill very strongly. It has a fair amount of support in the Senate. The House, we'll see what happens there, but. The legislative session's 9 weeks. It ends on March 11th. I think this is one of those issues that we could see come up to the very final weeks of the session.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, I think Rick Scott, and I've talked to a number of legislators before the session began, and they get along with him all right, but they find him kind of irrelevant. He doesn't really speak their language. He's a CEO. He works by not executive orders, but ordering things to happen. And they just find him hard to work with.
Well, and he's not in there swinging. I mean, he's jobs is his central issue, and yay for that. But there are a lot of other issues that we expect a leader of the state to deal with. Another one, and we don't have to get into it, but is the gambling compact.
Yeah,
I mean, he negotiated a deal with the Seminoles, and now he's like, here, you guys, I did my part, it's up to you.
Well, having worked for a governor, I worked for Governor Jeb Bush, it's an interesting dynamic. You talk about the legislative process. It's also an interesting dynamic between the governor and the legislature. And, the governor, the legislature, has the prerogative of the legislature. There's a famous story of Senator Dempsey Barron kicking Governor Lawton Childs out of the Senate chamber, said, get the heck out of my Senate. So, there's that tension that exists. Governor Scott, as you said, is focused on jobs, economic development, growth. That's his main issue. Tax cuts is another one. And I think a lot of times he lets the legislature figure out the other issues, and then lets his opinion be known when it's necessary.
And lets them also know that he's got a veto pen if they do things that he doesn't like. All right, let's move on to the presidential race. We're only, 8 days away from a week from tomorrow are the Iowa caucuses. And maybe I should point out, I've covered the Iowa caucuses a couple of times. It's a very curious duck. I mean, it's not really a vote. People go out into their local school and somebody says, all right, everybody for this candidate in that corner and everybody for the other candidate over there. It is really Americana, and it's kind of dear. It's a beautiful moment to watch it happen. But anyway, let's talk about where things stand. There's a new poll out today. Shows Bernie Sanders at 51%, Hillary Clinton at 43%. H.T., I mean, this is not a good start for Hillary Clinton, who was up by 30 points not long ago.
Yeah, this is not a good year for people who have been involved in the political process in the past. People want change, and they definitely want people who are at least giving them a promise of a totally different way of governing. Iowa has an outsized effect on the process because really it is not very representative of the nation, number one. Right. People vote in a very strange way for those of us who live in places like Florida to understand, but the press that will come out of it and the momentum that it will give to the winners and some people who will do much better. If you remember, this time last election, the person who was second from the last wound up winning it. The Pennsylvania Santorum. He was second from the bottom. He wound up winning it. So people, prognostication, this is a year that prognostications, you can throw it out of the window. We don't know what's going to happen.
The conventional wisdom often seems to be wrong, and it's been wrong in this race so far. I want to talk about it more. Stay with us. Back with more of our roundtable in just a minute. Welcome back on this Sunday morning, live in our studio, an all-star cast for the roundtable. H.T.Smith, law professor at FIU, civil rights activist Rosemary O'Hara from the Sun-Sentinel, and Justin Safey, who, as he said earlier, once worked, was the communications director for Jeb Bush. So Jeb doesn't and will not win Iowa. He doesn't have to. He can, but he has to do fairly well there. How do the polls show him down fourth or fifth?
Right. Well, you know, look, the pundits are saying a lot of things and the polls are saying things. 4 years ago, no one really predicted that Mitt Romney would win Iowa. On caucus night, they actually declared him the winner before 3 weeks later figuring out that Rick Santorum had beat him by 36 or 37 votes.
Right.
So I think we have to wait and see what the voters say. The voters, thankfully, have the final word on this in Iowa. But I think he'll do better than expected in Iowa. And New Hampshire, obviously, is critical. He's spending a lot of time in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
The campaign ads, they're airing in New Hampshire. So he needs a strong finish in New Hampshire for sure.
And Justin, let me ask you, I happen to admire the work of the columnist and former Reagan speechwriter Peggy Noonan in the Wall Street Journal. She had a column in this weekend's Wall Street Journal in which she said, quote, Mr. Bush uncorks witless prefab sound bites about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the chaos candidate. What does that even mean? What she is really calling for is for Jeb to get serious and say, here is why Donald Trump is not qualified to be president.
Well, what I first of all need to note is that of all of the Republican candidates, only one, Jeb Bush, is calling out Donald Trump. All the other candidates are in the witness protection. They're in the witness protection program. They don't have anything negative to say about Mr. Trump, only when they're attacked. But I give credit to Governor Bush for doing that because he knows that Donald Trump is not the right person to be the nominee for the Republican Party.
Yeah. HT, as you pointed out before we went on the air, the National Review published this week an article, an edition, which has 22 prominent conservatives saying, no, Donald Trump, he's not the real deal. He's not a real conservative. But you say you think that's going to backfire.
Yeah, I think it's going to backfire. This is the year that people are against the establishment. They are not for policies, programs, and position papers. They want the politicians first as the password to listen, that you feel my pain. You feel my pain about this administration that has made me a victim, and the leaders of the Republican Party who have promised and not delivered. So once you show us you can feel our pain and express it with anger and passion, we'll listen to you. So those messages are not getting through. And so I think that is, if I were a Trump supporter, I would want the people who are the leaders of the party to down me, and it plays right into his hand. Now, I'm a Democrat. And right now there's a civil war in the Republican Party. And I don't want to do anything to get in the way of that.
Smart man.
So does all of this redound in the favor of Hillary if she can kind of get her campaign together?
Oh, well, Hillary's an establishment candidate, too, and she's not lighting things on fire. And that Bernie Sanders is ahead in Iowa, and now Bloomberg is saying he might run as an independent. Oh, my God, all bets are off.
Yeah. All right, well,
I think it's interesting. There is divisions in both parties, and I agree with the construct that H.T. set up. It's outsider versus insider.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders is doing well against Hillary Clinton for the same reason that Donald Trump is doing well against all the other establishment candidates.
Donald Trump and Cruz.
I was going to say, but here's Ted Cruz, who I have read in private with big money donors, says, you can trust me, Princeton, Harvard Law, you know, and then he goes outside and says, I'm really an outsider. But he has been, he was the Texas Solicitor General, he was the Attorney General. I mean, he has been in politics an insider all his life, even though he is not well liked in Washington and doesn't like a lot of people there and kind of thrives on it.
Right, but that's what he's trying to appeal to, what people want at the moment, even though it's inconsistent with his record.
Yeah. All right, well, if we can, one of the highlights of the week, I think politically and for anyone, was Sarah Palin coming out to endorse Donald Trump and gave a talk that it was just zippity-doo-dah, zippity-yay. I mean, it was kind of unbelievable. When you heard, Rosemary, when you heard her get up there and in her own inimitable fashion, you know, kind of, it was like a jazz solo. I don't know what it was. It was kind of fun, but I'm not sure what she said.
Yeah, no, and I'm not sure Donald Trump knew what she was saying either. If you watched his face in the background,
Right.
I thought Jim Moran had a great cartoon in the Miami
Yes.
Herald. You know, his one
Yep.
frame was her talking or him saying he was going to surround himself with the best and brightest, and then the second frame was, "You betcha."
Yeah, how's that working out for you?
Yeah.
I also, I don't know, last night I watched Saturday Night Live believing that they were going to have to do something with it, and sure enough, Tina Fey showed up doing Sarah Palin, but I was struck, I mean, it was good, but I was struck, it's hard to satirize a self-parody. And it was fun, but it didn't quite ring the bell for me.
But I think it goes to what H.T. was saying before about the National Review, this conservative establishment organization trashing Donald Trump. Having Saturday Night Live make fun of you in certain parts of America is a badge of honor, because those are the people of New York City and Washington, the power centers of the country.
Right. The snarky media.
And the liberal elite.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
So in some certain circles, that's actually a badge of honor.
Yeah. Well, what about Michael Bloomberg, for 12 years, mayor of New York City, and by most accounts, people I know in New York think he was an excellent mayor, did a good job, and he's a billionaire, Bloomberg Media. I mean, if he, Rosemary, if he is serious and says he wants to get in, he, like Donald Trump, he can write his own checks. And
Absolutely. I mean, he's a billionaire on the other side, for the other party. He's a big ego guy, and if he says that he sees a path, I would take him seriously. And you know how I think it could shake out, I don't know, is that if Trump doesn't get the nomination, he's going to find a flaw in that contract he signed and run as an independent. And then on the Democratic side, if you have Bloomberg run as an independent, you have four, big personalities, and wow, anything goes.
But Michael, I think this is a trend you're going to see more often, is people who have not held elected office before, or people that are coming from outside the political system.
Yeah.
The first political job Michael Bloomberg had was mayor of New York City. He wasn't on the city council.
Right.
And Donald Trump's never held elective office. He's the front runner in the Republican Party right now.
Right.
I think we're going to start to see this a lot more over the next 10 or 20 years. People who haven't held office before, running for Congress, running for governor. Rick Scott had never held elected office until he ran for
and
governor.
Rick Scott, in the op-ed that he wrote for USA Today, for basically endorsing Trump, was, look, outsiders like me, can do the job. You don't have to have been in government. But the fact of the matter is, HT, I mean, when you go to court and you are arguing a case before an experienced judge, I mean, experience counts.
Yeah, experience does count. But when you talk about the legislative process, there's a big argument, if reading the Federalist Papers, that our founders really wanted citizen legislators. They did not necessarily want legislators to have this as a job for life.
Right.
But for judges, now that's a totally different construct. We want to have judges that have, the number one criteria is wisdom and judgment. And so we want experienced people to have wisdom and judgment. I always tell my students that raw intelligence is way overrated. You give me somebody with judgment and experience, and and hard work ethic, I'll take that any day.
Yeah.
But experience counts.
Well, it does. It does indeed. Before we run out of time, I want to show a little video of what we experienced in Miami-Dade County this week when several hundred motorcyclists and bikers and dirt bike drivers, here they were driving down some streets. Justin, you were in Tallahassee. You didn't. Here's what we all experienced. These guys forming up and really kind of terrorizing drivers on the streets of Miami and Miami-Dade. And H.T.Smith, they allegedly, this was in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. It happened on Monday, MLK Day. Here, watch this particular motorcyclist. He kicks a car that didn't show them proper respect. I mean, this is really, in many ways, outrageous. I mean, Dr. King would have not.
What's outrageous is the pathetic excuse of using Dr. King's legacy for this hooliganism type conduct. Dr. King was about sacrifice, service, and selflessness. This is hooliganism. This is selfish, and this is placing the lives and the property of our citizens in danger. Let's not give this much consideration as any kind of legitimate argument.
Right. And the police in Broward, the BSO, and others were not prepared for it. Let's hope they are next year. Well, we are out of time. Justin, Rosemary, H.T., great to have you come in. Sorry we didn't get to the Memorial Healthcare system, but I know you'll be editorializing on it, keeping an eye on it.
You bet.
All right, still to come, a look at the demolition of a legendary drug dealer's home, and then later, my personal perspective about that politician who did the right thing when it comes to guns on college campuses.